Universal Studios closes its gates every night at exactly 10 p.m., and for decades, visitors have wondered what really happens in those empty streets after the last guest leaves. The dark side of Universal Studios is not what you think it is. It's not about ghosts or haunted attractions left running in the darkness. It's about something far more human, far more unsettling, and completely hidden from the millions who walk through those gates every single year. What you're about to discover will change the way you see theme parks forever, because the truth about what happens when Universal Studios closes is darker than any horror movie they've ever produced. Imagine this. You've just spent 12 hours walking through islands of adventure, screaming on roller coasters, eating overpriced churros, and standing in line for 3 hours to ride a simulation that lasts 90 seconds. You're exhausted, sunburned, and your feet hurt so badly you can barely walk to the parking lot. But you're happy, right? You got your money's worth, you made memories, you posted 17 photos on social media with captions about living your best life. The park was magical. It was everything the commercials promised. Except here's what they never show you in those commercials. The moment the last family walks out through those turnstiles, Universal Studios transforms into something else entirely. The smiles disappear, the music stops, and what remains is a machine, cold and calculating, preparing to extract more money from the next wave of visitors who will arrive in less than 10 hours. But wait, because it gets worse, much worse. You see, Universal Studios operates on a principle that most visitors never notice, a psychological strategy so effective that it's been perfected over decades of research into human behavior, spending patterns, and emotional manipulation. Every single element of that park, from the moment you enter until the moment you leave exhausted and broke, has been designed not to entertain you, but to empty your wallet while making you feel grateful for the privilege. And when the park closes, when those gates lock and the lights dim, that's when the real work begins. That's when an army of workers you never see during the day emerges to reset the trap, to prepare the stage for tomorrow's performance, to count the money and calculate exactly how much more they can extract from people who just want to feel like kids again. Let me take you back to when Universal Studios first opened its doors in Hollywood back in 1915. It wasn't even a theme park then. It was a working film studio that allowed tourists to watch movies being made, to peek behind the curtain of the entertainment industry. The admission price was just 25 cents, which included a boxed lunch. 25 cents! Can you imagine? Today, a single-day ticket to Universal Studios can cost over $150 during peak season, and that doesn't include parking, food, fast passes, or any of the merchandise your kids will beg you to buy. But here's what's fascinating. Back then, Universal was honest about what it was. It was a studio. You were paying to see how movies were made. There was no illusion, no fantasy world, no pretense that you were stepping into another dimension. You were a tourist watching workers do their jobs, and everyone understood that transaction. Somewhere along the way, everything changed. Theme parks stopped being about showing you how entertainment is made and started being about selling you an experience, an emotion, a memory. And Universal Studios, along with its competitors, became masters of this new art form. They hired psychologists, behavioral economists, marketing experts, and experience designers whose sole purpose was to figure out how to make you spend more money while feeling less guilty about it. They studied traffic patterns to determine where to place the most expensive restaurants. They analyzed color psychology to design stores that would trigger impulsive purchases. They calculated the exact temperature at which ice cream melts fastest to encourage multiple purchases on hot days. Every single decision, from the width of the pathways to the placement of the bathrooms, was made with one goal in mind: maximize revenue per guest. And it worked. It worked so well that Universal Studios generates billions of dollars in revenue every single year. But here's what most people don't realize. The real profit doesn't come from ticket sales. Ticket sales barely cover operational costs. The real money, the obscene profit margins that make investors salivate, comes from everything else. The $20 hamburgers, the $15 beers, The $60 Harry Potter wands that cost less than $5 to manufacture. The Fast Pass systems that essentially charge you extra money to skip the lines that wouldn't exist if they properly staffed their attractions. The photos they take of you on rides and then charge $40 for a digital download. The parking fees, the locker rentals, the overpriced bottled water, the exclusive after-hours events that cost hundreds of dollars more on top of your already expensive admission. But wait, you might be thinking, nobody forces you to buy those things. You can bring your own food. You can skip the merchandise. You can just enjoy the rides. And you're absolutely right. Except that's not how it works in practice, is it? Because Universal Studios, like every major theme park, has spent decades perfecting the art of manufactured scarcity and social pressure. They know that when you're standing in the middle of the wizarding world of Harry Potter, surrounded by other families buying wands and robes and butterbeer, your kid is going to beg for the same experience. They know that when you've been walking for 6 hours in 90-degree heat, you're going to pay whatever they charge for a bottle of water. They know that when you've already spent $1,000 on tickets and hotels, what's another $100 on photos and souvenirs? It's called the sunk cost fallacy, and they exploit it ruthlessly. Now, let me tell you what happens when the park closes and you're not there to see it. The moment that last guest exits, hundreds of overnight workers flood into the park. These are the people you never meet during the day, the invisible workforce that keeps the machine running. They're paid minimum wage or barely above it, many of them working part-time to avoid providing benefits, and they have approximately 8 hours to transform Universal Studios from the exhausted, dirty, trash-filled space you left behind into the pristine, magical kingdom that will greet fresh visitors at opening time. They emptied tens of thousands of garbage cans. They scrub vomit from ride platforms. They pressure wash the streets. They restock merchandise in the stores, replacing every single item that was sold that day with fresh inventory from massive warehouses you never see. They repair attractions that broke down, fix lighting that burned out, replace props that were damaged by careless guests. And while they're doing all this physical labor, another group is working in offices you didn't even know existed within the park. These are the analysts, the data scientists, the revenue optimization specialists. They're downloading every piece of information collected that day from thousands of sensors and cameras throughout the park. They know exactly how many people rode each attraction, how long they waited, where they walked, what they bought, when they bought it, how much they spent. They use facial recognition software to track family groups, heat mapping to identify bottlenecks, predictive algorithms to forecast tomorrow's crowd levels. They analyze this data to find inefficiencies, to identify opportunities to increase spending, to adjust prices in real time based on demand. You think I'm exaggerating? Universal Studios and its competitors have patents on systems that adjust menu prices based on crowd levels and weather conditions. When the park is packed and it's hot outside, the price of that bottle of water can literally increase without you knowing it. Dynamic pricing, they call it. The same principle that makes your Uber cost more during rush hour. Except you're trapped in a theme park with limited options, and they know it. But here's where it gets truly dark, and I need you to understand this because it affects every single family that visits these parks. Universal Studios has spent the last decade perfecting a system of psychological manipulation so effective that it's changed the entire theme park industry. It's called tiered access, and it works like this. First, you buy your basic admission ticket, but that ticket no longer guarantees you a good experience. Wait times have been deliberately engineered to be long enough that the average family cannot ride all the major attractions in a single day without purchasing an upgrade. That upgrade is called Express Pass, and it costs anywhere from $70 to $300 per person depending on the day. For a family of 4, that's potentially $1,200 additional dollars on top of admission just to skip the lines you wouldn't be standing in if they operated their attractions efficiently. But Express Pass is just the beginning. There's early park admission for hotel guests, which means if you're not staying at an official Universal hotel at $300 to $600 per night, you get less time in the park than people who paid more. There's VIP experience for up to $350 per person that includes a private tour guide and access to normally restricted areas. There's after-hours events that cost extra. There's premium dining experiences. There's behind-the-scenes tours. Layer after layer after layer of upcharges, each one designed to make you feel like you're missing out if you don't purchase it. Each one creating a hierarchy of guests where wealthier families get better experiences than everyone else. And the cruelest part? They've convinced people this is normal. They've convinced families that spending $3,000 to $5,000 for a 2-day visit to Universal Studios is reasonable. They've convinced parents that going into debt for a vacation is worth it because you're making memories with your kids. They've convinced an entire generation that access to entertainment and escapism should be tiered based on income level, that some people deserve better experiences than others simply because they can afford to pay more. Think about what that means. Think about the family that saves for 2 years to afford a Universal Studios vacation, only to discover that their basic admission ticket puts them in 2-hour lines while wealthier families walk past them with express passes. Think about the kids who have to watch other children getting sorted into Hogwarts houses with interactive wands while their parents explained they can't afford the $60 wand. Think about the social stratification happening in a place that's supposed to be about fun and imagination. Universal Studios has taken the American dream and turned it into a tiered access system where even escapism is a luxury good. But when the park closes, when those gates lock and the crowds disappear, the people counting the money don't think about any of that. They think about profit margins and revenue per guest and quarterly earnings reports. They think about how to charge more next year without losing too many customers. They think about new ways to segment the market, new premium experiences to sell, new psychological pressure points to exploit. And here's what really keeps me up at night. It's getting worse. Every single year, theme parks push boundaries a little further. They raise prices a little higher. They add new premium tiers. They cut costs on labor and maintenance while increasing spending on marketing and surveillance technology. They lobby governments to keep minimum wages low and worker protections weak. They exploit loopholes in labor laws to avoid providing benefits to employees. They fight unionization efforts. They prioritize shareholder returns over customer satisfaction or worker welfare. Universal Studios reported revenue of $9.8 billion in 2023. $9.8 billion. And yet their frontline workers, the people who operate the rides and serve the food and clean the bathrooms and entertain guests in character costumes in 90-degree heat, many of them make barely enough to cover rent and food. Many of them qualify for government assistance despite working full-time for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Many of them work multiple jobs to survive. The wealth generated by Universal Studios flows upward to executives and investors, while the people who actually create the experience struggle to pay their bills. When the park closes and those overnight workers arrive for their shifts, they're not thinking about the magic they're helping to create. They're thinking about how to stretch their paycheck to cover gas and groceries. They're thinking about the medical bills they can't afford because the company doesn't provide health insurance to part-time workers. They're thinking about the college education they'll never be able to afford for their kids. They're thinking about the cruel irony of spending their nights maintaining a fantasy world for other people's children while their own families struggle. And the thing is, Universal Studios could afford to pay them more. They could afford to reduce ticket prices. They could afford to operate more efficiently and reduce wait times without charging extra. They could afford to create a genuinely inclusive experience that doesn't require wealthy families to spend thousands of dollars beyond admission. But they don't, because the current model is incredibly profitable. And in corporate America, profit is the only metric that matters. Shareholder value trumps human dignity every single time. Let me tell you about something specific that happened when I started researching this story. I spoke with former Universal Studios employees, dozens of them, under condition of anonymity because they're still afraid of retaliation. And the stories they told me were heartbreaking. One woman worked as a character performer wearing a full-body costume in Florida heat, entertaining children for 8 hours at a time. She made $11 an hour. She passed out twice from heat exhaustion.
The company's response was to tell her she needed to stay more hydrated, as if the problem was her water intake and not the fact that they were making her wear a heavy costume in dangerous conditions for poverty wages. She eventually quit after 3 years because she couldn't afford to keep working there. Another former employee worked in food service. He told me about the pressure to upsell customers on every transaction, to push the larger drinks and the combo meals and the desserts. His performance was evaluated based on average transaction value, meaning he was essentially being graded on his ability to extract more money from guests. He felt like a con artist, he said, taking advantage of families who had already spent so much money just to be there. But he needed the job, so he did what he was told, selling overpriced food to tourists while he himself could barely afford to eat. A maintenance worker told me about the constant pressure to fix things quickly and cheaply rather than properly. Management wanted attractions running at all costs, even if safety protocols weren't fully followed. He witnessed multiple incidents that could have resulted in serious injuries, and when he reported his concerns, he was told to mind his own business. He lasted 6 months before his conscience couldn't take it anymore. These are the people who create the Universal Studios experience. These are the human beings who make the magic happen. And they're being exploited systematically and deliberately by a corporation that generates billions in profit while paying them as little as legally possible. But here's what might be the darkest part of all. We're complicit. Every person who visits Universal Studios and doesn't question the prices, doesn't think about the workers, doesn't consider the ethics of the business model, every single one of us is enabling this system. We've been so effectively marketed to, so thoroughly convinced that theme parks are supposed to be expensive and exclusive, that we accept it without resistance. We post our vacation photos on social media, humble bragging about our expensive experiences, creating social pressure for other families to do the same. We've turned theme park visits into status symbols, proving our wealth and success through our ability to afford premium experiences. And Universal Studios knows this. They understand that people will go into debt for experiences, that we value memories and social proof more than financial security. They understand that parents will sacrifice their own well-being to give their children moments of joy. They exploit that love, that desire to be good parents, turning it into a revenue stream. They've commodified childhood wonder and sold it back to us at markup rates that would make loan sharks blush. When the park closes at 10 p.m., when those gates lock and the overnight shift begins, there's a moment of eerie silence before the work starts. In that moment, Universal Studios exists without its disguise. There's no music, no performers, no carefully maintained illusion. There's just an empty shopping mall designed to look like a fantasy world, surrounded by warehouses full of inventory and offices full of analysts plotting how to extract more money from tomorrow's visitors. In that moment, you can see Universal Studios for what it really is, not a magical kingdom, but a sophisticated trap designed to exploit human emotions and family bonds for maximum profit. The Harry Potter section, the elaborate recreations of Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade, those weren't built because Universal Studios loves the books or wants to honor the storytelling. They were built because market research showed that Harry Potter fans represented an incredibly lucrative demographic willing to spend enormous amounts of money on immersive experiences. Every detail in those lands, from the animatronic dragons to the working wands, was calculated based on revenue potential. The magic is manufactured. The wonder is synthetic. The experience is engineered. And that's not to say people don't genuinely enjoy their visits. Of course they do. The rides are technologically impressive. The attention to detail is remarkable. The emotional manipulation is effective. That's exactly the point. Universal Studios is very, very good at what they do. They're masters of experience design and psychological manipulation. They know how to trigger nostalgia and wonder and excitement. They know how to make you feel like you're getting your money's worth, even as they pick your pocket. That's what makes it so insidious. I keep thinking about something one former executive told me during my research. He said that every decision at Universal Studios starts with the same question: how do we make more money per guest? Not how do we create better experiences, not how do we make theme parks more accessible, not how do we treat our workers fairly, just how do we increase revenue per capita? That's the lens through which everything is viewed. That's the metric that determines success or failure. So when you ask what really happens when Universal Studios closes, the answer is this: the same thing that happens when it's open, just without the elaborate costume. Money is counted, data is analyzed, workers are exploited, plans are made to extract more wealth from families who just want a few days of happiness. The machine keeps running, cold and efficient, preparing for another day of manufactured magic and genuine exploitation. Empty tables, empty streets, empty promises. The park that seemed so alive just hours ago is now a ghost town being scrubbed clean by invisible workers paid poverty wages. The attractions that seemed so thrilling are now silent metal structures waiting to separate tomorrow's visitors from their money. The stores that seemed so whimsical are now empty shells being restocked with overpriced merchandise. Everything about Universal Studios, every single element, is temporary and transactional. Nothing is real except the money changing hands. And here's the thing that haunts me most: it didn't have to be this way. Theme parks could be affordable, accessible, joyful places that don't require families to go into debt. Workers could be paid living wages with benefits and dignity. The experience could be genuinely magical rather than psychologically manipulative. These are choices, not inevitabilities. Universal Studios chooses to operate the way it does because that's what maximizes profit, and in America, we've decided that's acceptable. We've decided that corporations have no obligation to their workers or communities beyond generating returns for shareholders. We've decided that everything, even childhood wonder, should be commodified and sold to the highest bidder. So the next time you're planning a Universal Studios vacation, I want you to think about what you just learned. Think about the workers who will serve you while struggling to pay rent. Think about the families who will watch you skip past them in line because they couldn't afford ExpressPass. Think about the psychological manipulation embedded in every element of the park design. Think about what happens when the gates close and the mask comes off. Think about whether the magic is worth the price, not just the money you'll spend, but the larger cost to human dignity and social equity. Maybe you'll still go. Maybe you'll decide the experience is worth it, despite everything, and that's your choice to make. But at least you'll know the truth. At least you'll understand what really happens at Universal Studios when the park closes. The same exploitation that happens when it's open, just without the cheerful music and cartoon characters to distract you from it. The dark side of Universal Studios isn't hidden in after-hours ghost stories or urban legends. It's right there in plain sight, visible to anyone willing to look past the manufactured spectacle. It's in the pricing structure that excludes working-class families. It's in the wage theft disguised as part-time employment. It's in the commodification of nostalgia and childhood wonder. It's in our collective acceptance of a system that values profit over people, shareholders over workers, wealth over dignity. If you felt this shift happening in America, not just at theme parks but everywhere, you're not imagining it. Entertainment has become a luxury good. Childhood experiences are increasingly segregated by income. We're creating a society where even joy and wonder are rationed based on ability to pay. And it starts in places like Universal Studios, where we've normalized spending thousands of dollars for a weekend of entertainment, while the people creating that entertainment struggle to survive.
Share your story in the comments if you've witnessed this inequality firsthand, if you've worked in the theme park industry, if you've felt the financial pressure of trying to give your kids the experiences corporations tell us they deserve. And if you found this eye-opening, subscribe, because the next documentary might reveal where all that money actually goes and who really profits from the magic. The truth is always darker than the fantasy, but at least it's real. And maybe, just maybe, if enough of us understand what's really happening when Universal Studios closes, we can demand something better than the theme park system we've been sold.